I want to move on now to what you think, Philip, will happen at sentencing. If there's a change of plea hearing on Wednesday, do you think they'll do the sentencing at that point in time as well, or because you don't really need a pre-sentencing investigation if you're pleading guilty and you're going away forever? So will they just do the whole thing on Wednesday and just wrap up this case once and for all?
I doubt it. I think they're going to take the plea and put it over for sentencing and victim impact statements. And that way you'll accomplish a couple of things. First of all, you'll let the dust settle between the time of the plea and the time of sentencing, and they can get their thoughts together as to how they want to address the court at sentencing and let them know what the effect of these murders have had on their personal lives. Something else the court can do, and I've actually done this myself during my career, and that is after a plea is taken in lieu of trial, we set it for a restitution hearing. And it's only heard by the court. It's done outside the presence of any jury. And the court takes evidence as to all the economic losses sustained by the victims and the victim's family. And what it does is it gives the families an opportunity to express themselves in court. They can kind of get it off their chest, what they've lost, what it's cost them. And sometimes it kind of eases the pain and takes the place of a full-on jury trial. And by doing it that way, they get their day in court, they're included, and they also get a judgment for civil restitution. And trust me when I tell you, they will tap into his prison earnings for the rest of his life. So the few times he might want to buy some special, hygiene products for himself, or some special comestibles from the commissary, like canned tuna fish or whatever they eat, in lieu of all that terrible high carbohydrate, high sodium, high fat food they give him, all that money is going to go to the family. And hopefully that will give the family some comfort that he's going to suffer by eating junky prison food for the rest of his life. And I know to you and me, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but trust me, when you're behind bars and the only thing you have to look forward to once in a while is a can of Star-Kissed tuna, it's a real treat. And it could provide some solace to the families, especially if they're given that chance to testify about it.
Sunny, what do you expect? I can only imagine when we do get to actual sentencing here, these victim impact statements will be so, I just can't even imagine. Just having watched some of these families over the last 2.5 years or so, almost 3 years, I think it will be very long. I think the sentencing hearing will be very long. It will be very emotional, but this will be their turn and their chance to really tell Bryan Kohberger, and who knows what impact it will have on him at all, if any, given the fact that they've said he has level 1 autism, which used to be called Asperger's. He doesn't show emotion. He's said himself in his Tapatalk posts, I feel nothing, basically. He's empty. So we don't even know if he's capable of feeling emotion or feeling much of anything. But this will be gut-wrenching.
I've had to write 2 victim impact statements, unfortunately. And it was long. At the time, I didn't think it was cathartic because I was so angry. But later I realized, okay, I said everything that I could have said at the moment. And it is, like you said, an opportunity for them to say how they feel and what they want to say. But I will say the Asperger and him not responding will probably irritate them even more. But sometimes you need to say things out loud. And if they're going to be able to read it themselves, I couldn't read mine. I had to have the prosecutor read mine for me, minus the curse words, of course. I think it is necessary. They want, we only hear from 2 other families. And let me say that this was always going to be a problem in the first place, whether all 4 families would come together and make a mutual decision about how they felt about the death penalty or not. But I do think it's going to be important for them to say all of the things that they need to say out loud for all of us to hear them, what they have to say, their feelings, the emotions, the pain of it all. I did not know these four beautiful young people who had so much life, but I felt like I did from their families, from the photos. It's like we got to know them. So they are part of us. And I think it's important that the family has the time that they need. And they don't realize they are still grieving and they probably have years to go before they get to healing. But I think this is a part of the grief process for them, and being able to verbalize and articulate their feelings out loud, even their disdain for the courts and for the prosecution right now, in a very respectful way still, because this is a process. Hopefully it will give them some relief. And like Philip said, the restitution portion of it, if that is possible, make that happen, because we don't want Bryan to be able to make any money off of this later. We don't want there to be any books, any movies, not from him, anybody close to him that he could potentially benefit from. So we need to close all of that down. That needs to be a conversation that they understand, and that the family can even express that, and the courts particularly, take it under consideration. I can't believe that we're here right now.
I'm sorry.
I said, I can't believe that we are here right now. I'm ready for a trial.
Here we
are.
It's a little stunning. I mean, Philip and I had talked about this before, that we thought this could happen. But we were getting really up close to the line here. We were inching closer to jury selection, and maybe the judges, denial of the request for the continuance was the final straw.
Yeah.
And maybe they had a really serious come to Jesus meeting with Bryan Kohberger. Yeah. And they said, we can't beat this. We can't beat this. All we can do is save your life. And maybe the message finally got through. They had repeatedly said he was difficult. It sounded like they had difficulty really getting through to him in some respects, or maybe he just thought he could wiggle his way out of this. Philip, I'm wondering, does Bryan Kohberger speak at sentencing? Does he offer an apology? And does he have to allocute? Do the prosecutors want him to allocute to maybe shut this down once and for all of the conspiracy stuff?
Well, we won't know until we get to court on this, what the precise terms of the plea agreement are, But my guess is, yes, they want a complete record of him admitting in open court everything that he did. And if you can get that on the record, and then he tries to finagle some type of appeal or petition for habeas corpus, they will have that record later on to get him. But I truly believe that this is a done deal. And frankly, I think the greater task for Ann Taylor was to get the prosecution to agree. Remember, prosecutors come from a political office. The head of their office is an elected official, and they have to answer to the body politic of their jurisdiction and to voters, to the electorate, about their decisions. And it's one thing to have apprehended him and to file charges and to bring him to justice, but the last thing you want is for voters to think you threw in the towel. But you would be amazed, Angenette, and Sonny backed me on this. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, even in Idaho, who are against the death penalty. Yes. Not everybody is on board with it. And the pendulum is gradually swinging away from it with time. And I do predict eventually all states are going to abrogate it. And hypothetically, what if these homicides would have occurred, for example, in Minnesota, where they have no death penalty? Then what? Okay, he needs to plead guilty. Off he goes to prison for the rest of his life. You're in the same posture. He's never getting out. If that type of criminal justice is not enough for victims, well, then I don't know what else is left. Short of vigilante justice or changing the law of your state, that's the max. And that's what you get under the law. And I'm heartened that prosecutors really gave in and really took a hard look at the mitigation and said, we're going to go ahead and accept this plea deal. and we're going to go through with it and end this once and for all. And in the end, if we're all honest, it's going to spare all these families the heartache, the aggravation, and the expense of having to come to court and face him and wonder what on earth a jury might do.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. With death penalty cases, you never know, and it only takes one juror.
Exactly.
And so they may have gone through the time and the expense of a trial, and with the Dateline leak, that's the least of it. But the Dateline leak didn't help matters, certainly in the last month or two. Plus, you have the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Mm-hmm. Anything else that possibly potentially could have been mitigating. You may have gone through the expense and the horrific nature of a trial and gotten the same result.
Exactly. And let's just pretend.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say really quickly, nobody ever thinks about this, and I think we should. There would have to be a jury that would have to see all of this evidence, all of the photos, take all of that in. And just from what we know, and we haven't seen all of the details that the jury would see, this has impacted us. It has definitely impacted me. So this will also spare additional harm, the collateral damage of a jury pool that would then become so impaled and ingrained with this trauma from this case and everything that they see during this case that they would never be able to unsee again. Mm-hmm. And there are no services for jury members after this. After all of this trauma, juries don't, they don't get to go to therapy for 3 or 4 years to get over all of this.
Yeah.
Philip, why does Bryan Kohberger suddenly have a change of heart and say, okay, I'll take the deal? Does he finally realize, looking at all of the evidence, does it finally just sink in that I'm toast? I'm more than likely toast, and I'll be lucky if I don't get sent to a potential firing squad. Does it finally sink in, or does he think maybe, you know what? Maybe like my life just really wasn't, I'm tired of fighting. Maybe my life wasn't really that great outside of prison or jail or whatever. Like I wasn't having that great of a time of it. He's got the hair, I forgot with the mitigating stuff. He's a recovering opioid addict. Mm-hmm. I mean, kudos to him for overcoming that. But there, you had that as well. I'm not saying that in any way justifies anything, but I'm just saying that the guy's got some major issues. He's had some major issues in his life. So why does he change his mind all of a sudden?
Well, remember, he wasn't a humanities or fine arts major. He was studying criminology and getting his doctorate. So he knew the drill. He knew good and well what evidence would be needed to convict him and to execute him. And he could see on paper what they had. He could hear his lawyer going over it with him line by line, showing him all the photos, showing him all the digital data. And if that's not good enough for him, then you know what? You shut down all settlement talks. But I think ultimately, over time, he really saw the gravity of all that evidence. And he said to himself, you know what is the point? My only hope here is to save my life. And that's what his lawyer did. His lawyer saved his life. And one other point, if you really think about it, let's just pretend, and I'm not pointing the finger at the prosecution or the cops in this case, that one or both leaked this stuff to the media. Mm-hmm. Let's just go with that. It would trigger remedies for the defense. And one of them could be to get death off the table anyway. So isn't it fair to maybe infer that this is a winky wink, that maybe we did have a hand in the leak and we're taking our lumps now? Just take death off the table. He's conceding guilt. He's convicted of 4 counts of murder. We don't have to prove it. We don't lose face. And certainly we don't bring any shame or obloquy to our office in the face of bad politics, if you will. and move on. And it's a win-win for both sides, because if we're honest, this was the best that Anne could hope for. And by the way, you know what I thought was a really bad piece of evidence? People keep forgetting about this. Is, correct me if I'm wrong, Angenette, he had a replacement sheet sent to mom and dad in Pennsylvania, didn't he?
He didn't. He
No.
didn't have it sent, but he apparently looked. His click activity, his Amazon click activity showed that he had gone on Amazon and looked again and possibly put it in the cart, but then didn't complete the purchase.
So he never actually
And they
ordered
tried to
it?
say, his defense tried to say that doesn't mean anything. We have an expert who's going to say things can influence that, et cetera, et cetera. So,
well, good luck with that. Look, the bottom line is they should be kicking their heels that they got a life sentence in this case. This is a done deal. I only hope that the judge actually accepts the plea, because in the end, the judge is the final arbiter of justice. Yeah. And if the judge really wants to, he can reject the plea and say, no, you filed this as a special circumstance case. I'm not going to allow you to withdraw it. We're going to let a jury decide, or if he wants to waive jury, he can let this court decide. I'm hopeful that Judge Hippler won't do that and will just accept this plea and close it out. There's an old expression in government law, and that is, a closed file is a happy file. Everybody's got a file. The court has a file. The defense has a file. The prosecution has a file. Everybody wants to close this puppy out, and everybody wins. The judge has one less case on the docket. The defense has spared their client's life, and the prosecution doesn't have to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a done deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really, I'm still a little bit surprised. I am and I'm not. I go back and forth. I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was kind of wondering, I wonder if there's something going on. I wonder if there have been any behind the scenes convos, because this isn't the first case I've covered, the first death penalty case that I've covered, where you go up pretty close to trial and then it seems like it's always the defense who initiates the discussion. So something happened, in my opinion, Sonny, something happened that prompted the defense to go to, because the client had to be willing to do it. So something, in my opinion, prompted the defense to go to the prosecution, to the state, and say, hey,
I agree.
We make a deal. So what was it that happened? What was the impetus?
I think the impetus was they had no more delays. The defense's objective is always to delay. And when there was no more delay, I think he couldn't deny where he was. And it was getting so close. And everything that he wanted to do, or that the defense wanted to do, as a criminology student, he knows process. He understands it. And he looked right into it and said, you know what? If I go to trial, I know they have the evidence, but more importantly, I also know that I'm guilty and I don't have anything else. I know I can't take the stand. So I think he made a conscious decision to save himself. Asperger aside, he's very smart. He has overcome a lot of things, and he realizes that this was his last best hope. And this is really about him. This is not about sparing the family. This is not about anything else. He wanted them, and they did. His team throw everything at the wall, and let's see what sticks.
I've got so many, just so you two are aware, my text messages have been blowing up for the last hours. Like, can you believe this? What's going on? I won't say some of the words that are in these text messages, but people are very surprised, needless to say, because they never thought that Bryan Kohberger would actually plead guilty. So it makes you wonder if these are conversations that his lawyers have had with him many times, that we can't beat this.
Oh
yeah. I think so. I mean, it's shocking. I was ready for the trial, but when I saw this, I was like, is that right?
Yeah. It's
It's a huge victory for the defense. Assuming the judge goes along with it, this is a tremendous win. You have a 4-count murder of college kids in their salad years, whole lives ahead of them, where the world is their oyster, wiped out at the hands of a psychopathic ASD type, criminology student, or ADS rather, gone, wiped out. Yes, he is convicted. His life is over. But under Idaho law, he could have very easily gotten the death penalty. And it is now being taken off the table in exchange for the plea. I'm telling you, this is such a commendable moment for the defense. I'm truly, truly happy in this outcome. I am. Now, on the other hand, it would have been a great trial to watch. From a true crime standpoint, right, Angenette? Right, Sonny? This would have been a really delicious trial to air, talk about, banter, get into all the legal issues, get into the weeds, but in the end, Bryan is not our client. He is a client of Ann Taylor and that defense team, and they owe him a duty of loyalty, not to the true crime viewing audience. As entertaining and as salacious as it would have been, they did their job in pursuit of justice for their client.
How much do you think that Judge Hippler played a role, in this coming together?
The short answer is it depends. It depends if the prosecution had a hand in that leak and they were afraid the judge was going to dismiss the death allegation, or, if the defense was handcuffed by not having enough time to work up the mitigation. Because if you think about it, it really inured to their benefit. Even being without the time to have all their experts look at everything that they needed to have analyzed, it doesn't really matter because this is what they wanted anyway. They wanted a life verdict, and this is what they're getting. They're getting mercy. So in the end, for the defense, it's a win-win. I don't think Ann Taylor and her crew ever believed for 1 minute that Bryan was going to walk on his precious alibi defense, that he was stargazing or, contemplating his navel while playing a sitar at Ashram, that kind of thing. There was no way he was going to walk away from it. It was really an issue of housing. Does he go to general pop? Does he go to maximum security, or is he condemned to death row?
Sonny?
Today there was discussion about the people that did not want to come, that didn't want to testify in this case. And, they didn't want to be associated.
Pennsylvania witnesses. For those of our viewers who aren't aware, sorry to interrupt you, but there were some witnesses from Pennsylvania who were being subpoenaed by the defense. Some, we believe, for the state too. And they had to show up at court and say why they didn't want to go, why they were contesting the subpoena. So that happened today. But go ahead, Sonny. I just wanted to clarify for our viewers.
And thank you for the context, because I'm talking like everybody, of course, knows all of the details, and that's important. But the collateral damage from these trials, as I was saying before, with the jury and with the witnesses, and as we have seen, that there has been a lot of controversy and a lot of disruption around social media and the media and the engagement with these trials. Speaking of, previous trial that just got over, and how people really react to these things. I think this case would have been exactly like that in some aspects of, witnesses being targeted, and witnesses, feeling, harassed, and media folks feeling. There has been a lot. I think this could have happened in this particular case. That picture that you just put up of him is so horrific and scary. So I think this kind of gives, if this goes through, and if the judge allows this goes through, I think it really kind of tampers down on some of what we have been seeing with the public and the media when it comes to some of these cases, because this is a very a hot button case. And the tearing down of the home. And remember, we're talking about the victims' families, but there's an entire community in that area that was deeply impacted by this. The educational institution, the home being teared down, the neighbors. So many people were impacted. So many people are we had the direct victims and then the indirect victims. And I think allowing this win, because it really is a win, like Philip keeps saying, it really is. The families don't see it that way right now. And I understand that. And I respect their perspective and I respect their feelings. And they need to have all of those. But generally speaking, I don't know if this case playing out in the public I think we should remember the 4 young, beautiful lives in a way that gives them elevation and not degradation in how they died.
And yeah, I agree. And I think that they need to be the focus. And now that he's admitting to this once and for all, the focus needs to turn to them again. That's who the focus needs to be on.
Yeah.
As I say that, though, I am going to say I think we need some answers about this.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd like some answers about this. I would like answers. I would like answers about this. This was going to be very tough for them at trial, dressing up as DM, the much maligned roommate by people who support Bryan Kohberger and the defense. They took so many shots at DM, who provided the description of Bryan Kohberger and wearing all black. I mean, it's like, are you reliving what you did? Yeah. Dressing in all black, sans balaclava, sans mask, and taking selfies. I don't know, but I would like some answers about these things.